Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Wrestling Doesn't Make Sense. We are here to just kind of talk about the crazy world of professional wrestling and all about how crazy it is. And yeah, we'll just get down to it. Today, I think we're going to be talking about some gimmicks, wild gimmick changes. I think we're going to be talking about, right?
Yeah.
Based in part because we've all seen the Bray Wyatt. Um, I don't even know what the best way to describe that is.
I'd say maybe like Mr. Rogers on acid, possibly.
Yeah, like the Pee Wee Herman thing.
Yeah. He's doing like a almost like a kid show kind of gimmick, but with all this sinister undertones with the creepy vulture puppet and then all the other various puppets as well.
Yeah, all that fucking stuff. I gotta say, I kind of like it.
Yeah?
Yeah, I mean, but it's because I think it's because of the undertones. You know what I mean? Like I saw one today where he was like painting a picture or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and then afterward, like I can't remember how it ended, but like the way it ended was like with Bray kind of looking into the camera, and only for like a second. Like it's the way he says it. Like he'll put like a certain emphasis on one word, which kind of makes everybody feel like it's the Bray Wyatt of old. Do you know what I mean? He'll kind of
Yeah.
he'll say something. He'll be like, "Oh, we're having fun today. We're having a great time," and then he'll just kind of say a phrase or something in a very cold manner, which makes you think that like there's more going on, which
Mm.
highlights those kind of undertones you're talking about, and that's what I like about it. I don't at the moment I don't understand how they're going to be able to turn these vignettes into like a wrestler.
Yeah, I've been thinking the same thing.
Yeah, like that's my main concern. These are entertaining, and I kind of see, I want to see, more of it and where it goes. But I don't know how they can convey this into like being a wrestler. How, like when Bray Wyatt comes back and starts to wrestle, if how that's going to be any different from Bray Wyatt.
Mm.
It's because he's just going to come back and wrestle like Bray Wyatt, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because I thought Bray Wyatt was a fine wrestler.
Yeah.
But like it also kind of negates the whole point of a gimmick change if the wrestler itself stays the same. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's like kind of limited evolution if it's just the just like his character is like slightly tweaked, but he's exactly the same in every other regard.
Right, but then I'm sure some of the other kind of gimmicks we talk about suffer from a similar fate.
Yeah, I'm
I
I'm
mean,
sure. Yeah.
like, well, like the one I brought up to you was the acolytes.
Mm.
Like I liked how whenever they were with the Undertaker, they were called the acolytes, and then after that, once the Undertaker thing kind of disappeared, they were known as collectively as the acolytes, but they turned into the APA.
Mm.
But they were still the acolytes. Gimmick changed completely. Instead of like being these dark, kind of hard nosed, very angry individuals working under the spell of the Undertaker. They were these kind of hard drinking, um, gambling kind of ne'er do wells. You know what I mean? They kind of went into business for themselves.
Yeah.
Effectively, that was their gimmick. Uh,
Muscle for hire.
exactly, but as wrestlers, they were exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
Like that didn't change at all. Um, so maybe that's not necessarily an important part of the whole gimmick. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess so. I think in their case, especially like the way the APA kind of came together was just them going from sort of they were really quite bland as part of like the corporate ministry because they didn't really say anything, and like you say, they just kind of looked angry all the time. and were kind of lost in the shuffle amongst like the rest of that massive group. But this was more like just almost like their real life personalities coming out, and because of that, they went from like two guys who no one really cared about into probably one of the more like popular teams back in the Attitude Era.
I think so. Yeah. But it was all due to the gimmick change, you know what I mean? Like they
Yeah,
just
yeah.
continued to wrestle exactly the same way as they had done before. But that gimmick change was necessary to really get them over.
And
You
they
know?
were, they even managed to stay over after like releasing a T-shirt which like said APA stood for always pounding ass. Like
Yeah. Well,
that's
I'm sure that made them really popular in certain circles.
yeah, I'm sure it did.
But at the same time, that wouldn't really be the kind of t-shirt that I would want to wear. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah, I probably feel a bit self-conscious, like walking down the high street wearing it.
well, I feel like, you can't always be pounding ass. You got to take a break.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Like that's just, silliness on the part of the APA. Um, yeah, that's kind of gloss over that whole area of the APA's career. That I mean their t-shirts really could have used a gimmick change right there, but
yeah.
you can't have everything. Who else did you think about in the annals of gimmick changes?
Well, I mean, since we're on the topic of the APA, like Bradshaw, just himself, like when the APA kind of fell apart in 2004, Ron Simmons retired, and Bradshaw basically went from one week being a member of the APA, and then the next week he'd suddenly like cut his hair, like cut off his goatee, and then was all of a sudden like a Texan millionaire coming out in limos and all that kind of jazz. And that
Yeah.
was like a really sudden kind of, gimmick change from out of nowhere, really.
Yeah, well, kind of, because for me, my history with watching Sunday Night Heat
Mm.
used to be the only thing I watched. I remember, like, legit one time, probably like maybe 2000 or 2001, on Sunday Night Heat, because they would sometimes do little special vignettes like that. Like, I remember one where Edge was off filming some TV show, so they showed him behind the scenes of him filming this TV show. And one of the little kind of behind the scenes things they showed legitimately was Bradshaw in the whatever the fuck, what do you call that place where all the financial stuff happens?
Wall Street.
Wall Street, yeah, he was actually in there, like ringing the bell and like the stock exchange. He was doing that, like actually in there. But he was like, Bradshaw with a big old goatee and the long hair, the denim,
Mm.
and his APA shirt. But he was in there like, trading stocks and stuff, like legitimately. Um, and at the time I was like, this is weird because because I was in the thralls of kayfabe. I was like, he's just a fucking beer drinking idiot. What's he doing? With the stocks. He doesn't know stocks. It turns out that like in real life he really does have a vested interest in business and all that kind of stuff.
Mm.
Like later on to see them actually bring that part of him, onto the screen was pretty cool. Although, yeah, it was really kind of out of nowhere because before that, unless you'd been watching that random episode of Heat that I happened to be watching, nobody would have known that Bradshaw is at all invested in that kind of area. You know,
Mm. Yeah, yeah.
what I didn't like about it, because I really like that character. I thought that Bradshaw, Bradshaw gets a lot of fucking heat from people, and a lot of it, is justified because he can be a bit of an asshole sometimes.
Yeah.
Um, but I really liked that character. I thought he did a really good job with it. He's very believable at it. It is not surprising at all to find out that Bradshaw is very good at playing a bully. You know what I mean?
Mm. Oh, yeah, totally.
He's very good at it, and I don't I didn't hate the idea of him becoming champion. What I did hate was the fact that he became champion so quickly.
Yeah, and at the expense of Eddie Guerrero as well.
Like it was just kind of like he was like, I'm Bradshaw, I've got a hat now, and then like a month or two later, I don't even know if it was even a month or two later, but like very quickly after he debuted the gimmick, he was already the champion.
Well, I
And like,
think part of that though was because of just the situation SmackDown was in at the time. Like I think Kurt Angle and Big Show were both injured, who are like two of the biggest stars. Brock Lesnar had quit around that time to go and play or try and play football. So like SmackDown didn't really have a lot of top level heels to go up against say Eddie Guerrero or Rey Mysterio or any of the other like top faces they had.
I guess that makes sense, from that kind of point of view. But still, I mean, I liked it. I just thought it was a bit rushed.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, he played that well, and I thought that, a lot of people might not have been able to kind of buy the gimmick change after having seen him. Like Bradshaw's been through a couple of gimmicks.
Mm.
He was in the APA. He was always pounding ass in the APA. And then he was Acolyte. And then he was like the cowboy for a bit. He was like Justin Hawk Bradshaw.
Yeah. Well, he kind of went back to that a bit as well when the APA broke up the first time during the first draft split.
Yeah.
That was the same sort of time that they split up the Dudley Boys as well. And I think that's when Devon became Reverend Devon.
Yeah. No, my problem with that, the splitting up, well, first of all, my problem with splitting up the Dudley Boys is that they're the Dudley Boys. You know what I mean? Like, fair play to Bubba Ray Dudley for kind of, very recently kind of proving that he could be a singles guy. But I'm like, at the time, they're the Dudley Boys, they're the best team. As a tag team, they're the best. I mean, like, it was silly to split them up with no idea what they're going to do with them, because at least Reverend Devon had a gimmick.
Yeah, but Bubba Ray was pretty much still Bubba Ray, wasn't he?
Right, Bubba Ray was the same, only he wore like a baseball hat, like
yeah,
it's exactly the same. So like I feel like where we're going to be going with this is we're going to be slagging off Reverend Devon quite a bit. But I would just in minor defense of Reverend Devon just say that at least he kind of had a gimmick and a push and like a point to it. He had Batista with him, which again is another gimmick change.
From
Deacon Batista, which was a terrible idea. What? But like, who looks at Batista and goes, what would be really good for you? If you were the Deacon to one half of the most popular tag teams of the last couple of years. Like none of that on paper made any sense. And true to form, none of it really worked. Well, to be fair, I think Reverend Devon kind of worked because Devon was into it.
Yeah, but I mean, like, the whole thing pretty much only came about because his catchphrase was testify.
Right.
It's like, how lazy can you get?
But then why didn't they make Bubba Ray a carpenter?
Yeah.
Always getting the tables, like.
They missed an opportunity there.
If we're gonna be going by just like pure catchphrase, we could have, you could have made some money there. But yeah, I thought Reverend Devon, as stupid a gimmick as it was, at least Devon kind of, was into it. And like, if you watch him do that stuff, he gets into it because really, Devon is a good talker. And I think people forget how good a talker he is because Bubba Ray is so good at getting heat.
Yeah.
Ray is a beautiful at getting heat, and I think people might forget just how good Devon is. And so at least Reverend Devon give Devon a chance to kind of talk on the mic. The problem with it, of course, is that nobody cared. Did you want to chat a little bit about Reverend Devon? I'm going to guess you probably weren't a fan.
Well, it was one of those gimmicks where they really didn't have like a long-term plan for it.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think is going to be like a common theme really for some of the stuff we end up talking about tonight, because
Mm-hmm.
a lot of these gimmick changes just seem to be like, well, this character's run his course, so let's just throw some shit against the wall and see what sticks, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but at the same time, you kind of need some sort of long-term idea of what you want to do. Otherwise, you get a character like Bray Wyatt who's just before this gimmick change right now, he was run into the ground pretty much, kind of losing every feud he was in, and just taken what could have been sort of like a new age Undertaker in a way, and basically pissing it all away. So yeah, I mean Devon, it wasn't a bad gimmick. It was something that made him stand out. And like you say, it was good for bringing in Batista, but it just the fact it only lasted from about like March until November in 2002 tells you all you need to know. It's like something that didn't have legs, and it's not really what, like you say, people wanted to see. They wanted to see Bubba and Devon together as the Dudley Boys. So it was no surprise it wasn't like something that lasted a long time.
You are right in that it really only was around for a couple of months during the brand split. They split up the Dudley Boys, and they had something to do for Reverend Devon, and they had nothing to do for Bubba and Dudley.
Mm.
Interesting that by the time they got to Survivor Series, they must have, because that was when they got back together. I remember
Yeah.
it was Survivor Series, because Bubba Ray was teaming with Spike Dudley, so he was still part of the Dudley Boys. Like despite splitting up the Dudley Boys, they're still running the Dudley Boys gimmick.
Yeah, yeah.
They still did that and got all the way through to it and said, people just want to see the Dudley Boys, which is, bizarre that they would kind of eventually reach that conclusion, like when they didn't have to. Like it was already written basically that people want to see the Dudley Boys.
Yeah,
They
it
didn't,
was obvious.
right, they didn't have to split them up and then go, wow, I can't believe it. People want to see the Dudley Boys together. I couldn't have imagined it, because anybody could have imagined that. It's not rocket science.
I don't know though. Maybe it was like Vince's idea to split them up and put them on different shows so that when they came back together, it would be a big deal again. But it depends really what they did with the Dudleys after that. And honestly, I can't remember anything that sticks out any more than when they first showed up in WWE and had the kick-ass feuds with like the Hardys and Edge and Christian and stuff like that. Like nothing from after that period where they came back together, sticks in the memory at all.
Well, it's funny you mention that because two guys who they had split up very recently and who got back together very recently were the Hardy Boys. The
Oh yeah.
Hardy Boys came back, what, a couple of years ago? Was it 2017? I think they came back.
Yeah, yeah.
They won the tag titles. So they came back as a team, and then they split them up for some reason. So Jeff Hardy continued to be Jeff Hardy, and Matt Hardy became whichever one he was,
Woken.
Matt Hardy.
Yeah.
Which I feel like we're gonna have to chat about on this one because that was quite a gimmick change.
Yes, definitely. What with the whole awful English accent and like his kooky delivery and all that kind of stuff. He
But
was a pretty strange customer.
yes, and we'll delve into that in a second. But isn't it interesting that they brought the Hardy Boys back and they totally dropped that entire angle with Matt Hardy? Like
Yeah.
if you watch Matt Hardy now, he talks like Matt Hardy. He doesn't talk like woke Matt Hardy or whatever the fuck. He's just Matt Hardy, as if
But
as if that was all forgotten about.
yeah, it was kind of the same though when they first came back to the WWE as well. Like they built up this big name for themselves as like Broken Matt Hardy and Brother Nero, sort of like created a lot of buzz and everything. And then they come back and then essentially they were just the Hardy Boys of old. And then yeah, they did like very briefly did the Woken gimmick with Matt Hardy, but I don't know. I think it's one of those gimmicks where because it wasn't like a WWE idea, they were always hesitant to sort of invest in it and give him give Matt Hardy a decent push. So in the end, because he wasn't doing something that was WWE created, he sort of had his legs taken out from under him.
Did you like that broken Matt Hardy thing?
Yeah, well, I don't know. It's one of those things where, in a way, it was cool because it was something completely different to everything else going on, especially with like all the matches at the Hardy compound and stuff like that, the delete or decay, final deletion, all that kind of jazz. It was interesting, and at that time it brought eyes to TNA as well because let's face it, not a lot of people were really watching the company at that time. Mm-hmm. But for me personally, I don't know, it just seemed a bit too goofy for my liking and a bit too out there, really.
Okay. Yeah, I'm very glad you said that because that's very much how I felt about it. Like, it's probably no secret on this podcast that I'm not really a big fan of the Hardy Boys. Like, I mean, like they're a good team. They work well together. They were just never my thing.
Yeah.
And so when I heard them doing this Woken thing or Broken or whichever the one it was that was in TNA, I wasn't that enthused about it because I kind of stopped watching TNA about that time. Like I remember switching on TNA one time and I saw like what looked like a clown in the middle of the ring.
Mm.
What are they doing? And then I kind of stopped and had another look, and I'm like, oh, that's Matt Hardy. That is Matt Hardy. Oh dear. So yeah, I didn't think that was, as somebody who wasn't a big fan of the Hardy Boys to begin with, I didn't think that was a good way to get me invested in the Hardy Boys. I will admit that, like, fair play to Matt, he really put a lot of effort into it. Like he really, like he dug it. He really went for it. And I can't fault him for that because, he really put a lot of kind of creativity and effort and stuff into that. So I can't knock him for that. It just wasn't my cup of tea at all. It was a bit too silly. A lot of people loved it because it was the kind of goofy stuff that you could only see in pro wrestling. And I'm like, yeah, but also this isn't the kind of pro wrestling I want to watch.
Yeah. You see, this is the kind of same feeling that I'm getting with the new Bray Wyatt gimmick as well, to be honest. Like it's just not grabbed me, so far in these first couple of weeks, just because it does seem a bit, out there and like almost separate from the reality of like everything else that's going on.
Right.
And it's hard to kind of invest in that kind of thing sometimes. Like, and you get gimmicks like The Undertaker and stuff where you just kind of, accept it right off the bat. Like, oh yeah, sure, he's like an undead man who's like got supernatural powers. That's fine. But when it comes to, Matt Hardy talking in a weird accent, it's just like, nah, that's too far, mate.
Right. But like, it's a totally different thing, I think. Like, it's okay for The Undertaker to like play the dead man character and whatever because he's playing it straight. Whereas the Matt Hardy thing and the Bray Wyatt thing are a little bit like wink wink, you're in on this too, which kind of takes the fun away from it in a little bit, if you know what I mean. Like they know how stupid it all is, and that's
yeah.
I mean, I get that way more from the Matt Hardy thing, where they were just like, this is like it's all garbage, so why don't we be the best at being garbage? You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like, if it's gonna be stupid, we may as well be really stupid.
Yeah. Which
is usually a philosophy I'm on board with, but when I'm watching kind of entertainment stuff, I'd like it to be, especially like pro wrestling. We talk about how little sense it makes because we want it to like make sense. That's why we got into it. Was the illusion that it was a competitive sport, and even despite the fact the Undertaker was a dead man, like you never. I think especially whenever we started watching, you just thought that the Undertaker, it was like a name more so than a gimmick. You know what I
Oh, no, when I first started watching him, I legit thought he was like a zombie.
When did you start watching before me, right?
Yeah, I was like, well, I think I started watching in '89, so I was around for like when he first debuted and everything.
Oh, okay. Well, when I started watching was like Attitude Era. So it was the tail end of the ministry and the beginning of Biker Undertaker. And
Mm,
like, I didn't really, I'd seen the Hell in a Cell match against Mankind, of course, I'd seen that.
yeah.
But again, I was like, oh, he's just it's more of a name than a gimmick because I didn't see any of the shooting lightning out of his hands or fucking any of that stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
And the stories that they were telling were still kind of grounded in like reality and stuff. Like Kane being his brother, that could make sense.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like all of that was okay. Like the idea that they would have a little feud and stuff. That was all still reality based. You know, um,
Yeah.
that they had they had a war against each other and that one of them burnt down the other guy's house. Well, and so he was scarred for life. It had like a realism to it. Had it been like Undertaker burned down Kane's house and then Kane died and then Paul Bearer brought him back to life, then I'd be like, because I'm pretty sure that's not how that went, right?
No, no, it definitely wasn't. I think, yeah, it was like essentially, I think Undertaker and Kane were playing in their like parents' funeral home, and then something happened. I'm not entirely sure whether it was Undertaker or Kane who was supposed to have accidentally knocked over the chemicals or whatever, but that set fire to the funeral home, ended up killing their parents, and then Undertaker thought that Kane had been killed as well, but he'd just been kind of, heavily
Yeah.
scarred and then taken away by Paul Bearer to be warped into what he later became.
But that still made sense. That was like kind of not beyond the realms of like reality. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's very comic booky, but
Yes,
then,
yes, it is. But
I love comic books, so it kind of speaks to me a lot.
they did enough kind of explanation of it where you were like, okay, that's fair enough.
Mm, yeah.
Whereas with like broken Matt Hardy, it was just like one day he was fucking broken or whatever. Like you got to hit or something. I don't. What was the explanation for that?
I don't entirely know what it was in TNA that kind of set him off on this journey, but I mean, in WWE, I think it was just he like hit his head on the turnbuckle or something, and he
Right.
got knocked loopy in one match, and that's how he became Woken Matt Hardy.
And we all know that that's not a good explanation
No,
because people hit their heads off the turnbuckles all the time.
exactly.
So the explanation they've given us isn't really like justifiable for such a silly gimmick.
But
If you
then, I mean, sometimes you don't really even need a justification. Like, speaking of The Undertaker, like when he went from the whole Lord of Darkness kind of corporate ministry, and then sort of, I think he got injured in like late '99, and
Mhm.
then came back 6 months later as the biker Undertaker, American Badass. That there was like no explanation to that whatsoever. It was just, he's back after this amount of time, and all of a sudden he's a biker. But
Yeah,
it worked because he knew his character, even as like a biker, and even then he still kind of came across in a similar sort of vein as like the Dead Man as well.
right. Now I maybe it's just because I'm a little biased and I grew up with that era of the Undertaker, because that was really, like I said, I didn't see a lot of the dead man stuff and the lightning out of the hands and stuff,
Mm.
but like and I'm also not a big fan of the Undertaker, which is probably another thing that we've covered on this podcast. But I quite liked that gimmick because I thought that because it made sense. I mean, it didn't make sense why he was called the Undertaker because
Yeah.
he was just driving around in a Harley Davidson, and he had his little like fucking bandanas and stuff. But it made sense because he was this big kick-ass guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because he is. Undertaker's is this big fucking kick-ass guy. For example, had they debuted the Undertaker like that in 1990, people would have bought it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because he's a big fucking kick-ass guy. Like if he says, "I'm gonna, this is my yard. I'm gonna kick your ass if you walk into my yard," you're gonna be like, "Yep, yes, you will." I totally get that. So like, I thought the gimmick change kind of made sense because that was not only was it very true to who he was, like the Bradshaw thing, is very similar to what I imagine his real life kind of character to be, but that he played it so well. Like yeah, you're right. It didn't really need an explanation because it really was just a big guy coming down the ring kicking ass.
Yeah.
He didn't have to do anything else. He didn't have to kind of, although a little bit of explanation would have been nice. If somebody had said, "Hey, what about those 10 years where you were dead?"
Yeah.
A little bit of that, but
I like how they brought in his wife as well for the whole DDP angle. It's like, hang on, this dead man's like married to some woman, so is that like some sort of necrophilia going on? What's the deal here?
Yeah, is she dead? or is she the necrophiliac? Because he's dead.
I presume so.
Wow, this is stuff that we didn't really think about. Probably for good reason. Do you want to? Here's a gimmick change I liked, which is related to the Undertaker. Was Keane's gimmick change where he became like corporate Keane?
You liked that, did you?
I'll tell you why. Because Keane in a suit and tie is 100% creepier as Keane. So like, well, let me clarify. Keane, whenever he was like proper Keane, when Keane was in his prime in the character, when he was doing that stuff with the Undertaker, like from his debut up till about 2001, before he lost the mask.
Before he started talking as well.
Yeah, really, like, again, because the gimmick was he didn't need to. He was this big fucking monster guy.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't have to say a word. He would just kick ass and everybody got it. You know what I mean? They understood that's what the gimmick was. And he was so good at it that he didn't need to do anything else. So he was really good then. And then there was a point where like he had the half mask, which was nice. I liked the half mask, but he wasn't really like, he didn't seem like a monster anymore. And he lost the mask, which I didn't like because I quite liked the idea of the mask. I thought it contrasted well against the Undertaker, for example. It made them two very different, separate identities, which I really liked. And there weren't a whole lot of other masked superstars around. It was Rey Mysterio, and that's it. Cody Rhodes with his face mask for a little bit, but like that was it. You didn't have any other people wearing masks, and I liked it. So I didn't, and also the fact that when they took the mask off, it exposed the fact that Keane wasn't actually horrifically scarred from his, the mortuary being burnt down.
Yeah, well, they kind of like tried to present it like that, though, didn't they? When the mask first came off, like his face had all been painted up black and kind of given all this makeup to make it look like something was wrong with it.
Right.
And then the next week he came out and it was fine.
Yeah, but also like if you've had your face burned, little black splotches is not the way that.
Yeah.
It's not how that works.
Well, the thing I liked about that was, again, going back to like comic books, was the whole Doctor Doom kind of element to it. Because like in the comic books, he had like some sort of experiment blow up in his face, which is why he wears his like famous metal mask. And then there's been all these kind of different takes on it where some say like it wasn't actually like the explosion which ruined his face, it was him putting on the metal mask which kind of hadn't cooled down enough, and then that scarred his face. And then there's other interpretations saying, oh, he wasn't actually scarred at all. There's like some sort of minor mark, but because he was so egotistical, he kind of
Yes.
thought that, oh, my face is hideous.
That's when I had heard that he was very vain and he had a minor like some kind of minor problem to his face, and he got very because he was so vain he started wearing the mask because he thought
Yeah.
he was disfigured, but he wasn't really. That was when I had heard.
So
Um,
like the Kane situation was almost similar. Like it was almost like a psychological kind of
well, yeah,
reason for wearing it.
that's what they did after that, isn't it? They were like,
Yeah.
it was all in his mind, and you're like, oh, what?
Yeah.
God damn it. I think again, like it was the way they kind of revealed it that made you think that you're like, no, that's it could have been psychological if you'd have maybe built it up a little bit instead of just one day Triple H takes his mask off and then you go, oh yeah, he made it up, it's anticlimactic. But like whenever he had no mask, it was weird. And then whenever you see him just dressed up in a suit and a tie, like acting normally and talking normally, that was so much creepier than the Kane that he'd been trying to play from like 2004 onwards. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Way creepier. Which is funny now that he's the mayor of wherever the fuck he's the mayor of, Knoxville.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. So he has to wear a fucking suit and tie now and all the time, and thereby look super creepy. I mean, it's probably not as creepy now because none of us were used to seeing Kane dressed like that.
Yeah.
That's why it was creepy. The people who work in the Knoxville mayor office are probably used to seeing him like that now, so it's less creepy. But that's what I liked about it because and I don't think they really played that angle up enough. But given Kane's history as being a kind of creepy, mysterious character, I think they should have played that creepiness up a bit more. But they didn't really, and it just seemed to kind of exist in my head more. But that's why I like that kind of gimmick change.
Yeah, you see, I think the reason I don't like it is more because of the stuff going on around it, like him being part of the Authority, which was just like a soul-destroying watch, really. Like every week it would be Triple H and Stephanie just constantly like ruining Monday Night Raw, pretty much. Just whether it was Daniel Bryan or Roman Reigns or whoever it was, they were like constantly trying to screw. It was just same old shit week after week. So, having Corporate Kane, it might have worked if he wasn't associated with them for me, but because of that association, I just kind of automatically remember it being awful.
Yeah, that wasn't a good time. I don't think that whole Authority thing, not so good because it was really just like a total rehash of stuff they've already done.
Yeah.
And the problem with that is, they've already done it, and you can't really replicate it the same way because it doesn't have the same authenticity about it.
No, I mean once you've seen something once, it's pretty difficult to top it the first time, isn't it? So
Right, but also like if you just watch the way that Austin would get in Vince's face and the way the two of them worked together and the way that things would play out, it was a totally different thing than watching whatever Triple H against Roman Reigns or anything like that. It just didn't have the same impact because it wasn't built up the same way. Like everybody knew that Vince McMahon was Vince McMahon and that he owned the place and that he screwed Bret Hart. Like the stuff was there and they built it up slowly and surely, the same way they built up Austin, slowly and surely.
Yeah.
Until it all came to a head. And then once it all came to a head, people were like, fuck yeah. And they could identify with that because everybody wanted to punch their boss in the face. Like that's why it got over. It was the right gimmick with the right people at the right time.
Mm.
And all of those things were the inverse with the Authority. It was the wrong people. It wasn't timed right. It wasn't set up right. that's why it didn't work. I mean, I think it might have been able to work if they'd done it right and kind of built it up properly. Because they didn't. They were just like Triple H and Stephanie own the place. Oh, here comes Roman Reigns. We don't like him. Like, why?
Yeah,
Why don't they like him?
yeah.
What's the gimmick there? You understood immediately why Vince McMahon didn't like Steve Austin.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like it was, if you were the boss of any company and you saw a guy like Steve Austin acting like the way Steve Austin does, you'd want to fire him too.
Yeah, but Roman Reigns is like as clean cut as they come.
Right. It made no sense. Like why wouldn't you want that guy as your champion? And that was the hook they never explained. Like why not? Why don't they like Roman Reigns? I don't know.
A obvious choice for a really good gimmick change has got to be Sting. Going from like the whole surfer dude gimmick to the Crow.
Yeah.
That was pretty spectacular, really. Like the way that WCW kind of built that up as well for so long. I think it was, he started kind of changing his look a little bit in early '96 before the NWO came in. But then once they came in, and then I think it was around like September, around Fall Brawl, where he just kind of almost like walked out on WCW and the NWO and stuff. And that's when he started appearing in the rafters and then doing those occasional attacks. And they're basically just, spending the next year not saying anything, but like just his presence in that gimmick was enough to kind of build up this eagerly anticipated match with Hulk Hogan at Starrcade '97. And yeah, like that whole transformation from the loud, bubbly kind of fun-loving Sting to this dark, morose, silent character. That transformation was amazing.
Right, like that character like did a complete 180. Said like you got it immediately because everything about that guy changed. The clothes changed and the face paint changed. So you could tell that there was a change in attitude. It was a very subtle thing, and it seems a little bit trite maybe, but like the way it was done was very good. WCW screwed up a lot of things. I think that's fair to say, but at least they got that part right. They definitely did. Like they got the beginning of the NWO angles pretty spot on. Right? We can't fault them for that. And I think that certainly the rise of the NWO and the appearance of Crow Sting were very well put together. And it really did that's exactly how you build a year-long angle. You know what I mean? It's so simple and yet so effective. And like you said, without Sting having to say a word, there's a guy who like changed his gimmick, changed everything about himself, and he didn't have to say a word. Like that's hard. Like you couldn't really pull that off these days.
Absolutely, yeah.
And yet he did it. So that's a testament to Sting, I think, as a performer. Also a testament to the way that they were thinking about angles back then. Obviously not long term, but it's good writing. I think though, if we're going to be talking about extreme gimmick changes, we're going to have to stick around that time frame and talk about Hollywood Hogan.
Yeah.
I gotta say, I'm not a huge fan of Hulk Hogan, but I really liked Hollywood Hogan because Hogan got it right.
Yeah.
And yes, Hulk Hogan certainly overplayed his hand when it came to creative control and was on top way too much, and it all went on too long, and there was a lot of like questionable decisions made in the kind of booking, for him being champion and stuff. But I thought that he played that very, very well. Like he jumped on board that heel train. You know what I mean? Like he got it, and of course he would. He's Hulk Hogan. The man knows how to do business. But he immediately was able to flip the switch from good guy to bad guy, which is hard because since he had been the good guy for so long.
Yeah.
It's immediately, and his in-ring work um, reflected that because it's just straight up brawler. You know what I mean? Like again, like it's hard to watch those kind of matches because they're not interesting. They're not fun to watch. But if you just remember that the gimmick is that he's just this, kind of cowardly fucking heel who's just like brawling and eye poking and stuff like that, just doing anything he can to get through a match, which is what a heel should do. You can't fault it for that. I think that as a gimmick change, that's up there. You know what I mean? Because it made him interesting again, which he hadn't really been, certainly in WCW up to that point. And I would wager, at any time in the 90s up to that point.
Yeah, oh, definitely. Like, before he left WWF back in 94, it was either 94 or 95, but like he was getting booed really regularly because it was just the same old shit and people were, fed up with it. They'd seen it all the time, like him getting beaten down and then hulking up and then here comes the big boot and the leg drop and that's it, game over. It's like, same old shit, different night. But with the NWO, it was like you say, like a total reinvention, and the way he wrestled and everything, it just was like, completely fresh compared to the previous 12 years of Hulkamania, which had run its course.
Right, like all of that stuff, he just threw it out. He threw out everything. He kept the leg drop, but like everything else, he just, it was something new.
Mm-hmm.
It's brave and and again, it wasn't all great. Like I said, the matches weren't always fun to watch because it was a lot of brawling and a lot of, a lot of stalling and stuff.
Yeah. Like his matches with Roddy Piper were pretty horrendous around that time.
Well, I'm sure you could write a big list of like all the matches he had that weren't great. I mean, but for for living the gimmick, they worked.
Yeah.
So I can't really fault them too much for that. It shows how believable it was because that that made sense. He wasn't putting on 5-star classic matches because he wasn't supposed to.
Yeah.
He's the heel, he's the bad guy, and he's not supposed to be the champion. That was the gimmick. They're supposed to cheat to win. Like the NWO were the ultimate cheaters. That was the entirety of the gimmick, that they had numbers on their side, so they didn't have to wrestle a match.
But ironically, though, that it kind of helped make them bigger baby faces because they were, they played the cool heels, so everyone was kind of, into everything they did, and by, comparison, all the WCW guys look like, stiffs and lamos and stuff, and how could you not go for cheer the NWO guys over the likes of Lex Luger and whatnot? So
I would counter that. Everybody except Hulk Hogan were the cool heels.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If for example, if you watch Kevin Nash and Scott Hall cut a promo, you'd be like, it's hard to hate these guys because they're so good at what they do. Like they have charisma for days, and it comes off, and you're like, when you look at them, you're like, I just want to hang out with these guys. That was the hook. You couldn't hate them because you wanted to hang out with them. Hogan, on the other hand, I really think that he did a great job at establishing himself as that heel, as you really didn't want to see at the top of the card at all, and just a guy you didn't want to do business with because he seemed very slimy, and he seemed very cowardly and kept full of himself, and the fact that he was best friends with Eric Bischoff again was played very well. Right in the corner of the the management. It was, he didn't really, he wasn't able to pull off the coolness as well as Nash and Hall. But I think that him doing his heel stuff worked perfectly for him being on top anyway, because that was exactly the way he should have been doing it, as that kind of heel. You know what I mean? Like the problem with Hall and Nash is that they're always going into business for themselves. They're always trying to look cool and like it was a good angle, but like you said, everybody wanted to hang up. They wanted to be part of the NWO, and that was entirely the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Was that all the boys wanted to be part of the NWO too, and then it got too busy and too complicated, and they didn't have the same level of coolness as Hall and Nash, and even X-Pac to a degree. You know what I mean? Like, because the three of them got on together so well,
Yeah.
they could play that off perfectly. And that was the problem. Once you start adding up other people who weren't able to give up the same vibe, the same NWO vibe, then that's when it got complicated. Because then it wasn't cool to be part of the NWO anymore.
No, not when you get like Virgil in it.
Right, and fucking Buff Bagwell and stuff like this. They didn't look cool. They just looked really annoying.
Yeah.
And like it wasn't just that the product got diluted, but the problem was that it got diluted by people who shouldn't have been there in the first place.
Yeah.
You could argue that Rick Rude and Kurt Hennig would have fit in. They did fit in pretty well in the NWO.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even Conan had that level of like effectiveness on the mic where he could pull it off.
Yeah.
Right, but like some of the other guys just didn't fit in, and like it showed. And I think that was the real problem with the NWO. Like Scott Steiner. Oh, there's a good one, Scott Steiner.
That was a pretty drastic gimmick change right there.
When I say good one, I don't necessarily mean good as in quality.
Yeah. You say that though, but I really dig the whole big bad booty daddy gimmick when he became that.
Oh no.
Freakzilla. It was like such over the top gimmick that it worked for me. Like him being all this, ultra confident and then thinking he's like such a ladies' man and all that kind of jazz. And that it just because before he didn't really have much of a personality as part of the Steiner brothers. Mm-hmm. Him and Rick both were quite bland characters, really. Like I remember when they were in WWF briefly, and like their gimmick was basically that they were from the University of Michigan. Like they'd come out with their like university jackets, and that was it. And it's like, okay.
It's not a good gimmick.
Yeah. So yeah, it's good to see him have some sort of personality coming out.
Yeah, I'll give you that, but I just it's hard to buy into Scott Steiner when you're not sure exactly what it is he's selling to you.
Mm.
You know what I mean? I'm like, what am I looking at here? What is this? I couldn't quite get the gimmick because I didn't know what the gimmick was, and the guy trying to convince me about the gimmick. I mean, if the gimmick was just an insane white man, then yes, he nailed it. I bought it 100%, because everything that he did, post Bleach Blonde was just insane.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, if that's the gimmick, okay, fair enough. He is insane. And like I know that's why a lot of people like him because he's just mental. They just love listening to him talk because he talks such shit. Like people love that, but I never really bought into it. That just wasn't my thing.
Nah, fair enough.
But that was a very that was a big gimmick change because again the Steiners had been known for a long, long, long time as a tag team, and like you said, they were pretty, they were a great tag team, but as characters, they weren't anything. They were the Steiners.
Yeah.
There was no gimmick there. At least the Dudley boys were from Dudleyville, and there was a gimmick there, and there was all sorts there. Whereas the Steiners, like you said, the Steiners were from University. But that's not good. You need a little bit more substance to it than that. So at least you can't really knock them for going all out with a gimmick change like that.
Mm.
So that's fair enough. But
And you can say it was successful for him as well, because he ended up becoming like a multiple-time WCW champion and everything as well. So obviously it paid off.
well, I mean, yes and no. Yes, in that it was an interesting gimmick change and it got eyes on him, but no, in that it was in the absolute shittiest period of WCW where they definitely were doing that throw something to the wall and see if it sticks routine.
Yeah, I guess.
I mean, that's whenever Jeff Jarrett was champion.
Yeah, that's when the title got bandied about like
Right.
every other week, pretty much.
So like is that a thing to go bragging about? You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
like, didn't Steiner and Jarrett form like NWO 2000 or something?
Yeah, that rings a bell. Yeah, like NWO Silver or something like that.
Some fucking, you're right, but again, is that worth bragging about? That's if I were those guys, I would kind of maybe leave that behind them. Yeah.
All right, so should we go from like one bleach blonde guy to another? And what about Kerwin White, who was
Lord.
Chavo Guerrero Jr. and then basically during the brand split in 2005, he got moved over to Raw and decided he's going to renounce his Latino heritage and become like a middle class golf playing conservative. And yeah, it was like a pretty odd gimmick because of the like racial undertones to it as well. You'd even go around telling, other non-white superstars that they should think about, trying to please the masses more and stuff like that. And I don't know, it's one of those weird things which they definitely wouldn't get away with doing now, that's for sure.
Right. Well, in some ways, don't you think that is a brilliant angle? Like, I really like stuff like that whenever they get like a little too close to the bone.
Mm.
But like in a good way. And I don't mean like, them having to go with Eddie Guerrero a week after he died. That
Yeah.
not cool. But like that kind of, because there are people in America that do think that maybe some minorities should just act a bit whiter and they get further in life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that kind of talk to us is like bizarre, but to groups in America, people will be like, yeah, why don't you try to get yourself more? You know what I mean? Like, and I love that kind of stuff. I wish they would do more, but obviously the problem is that they have a habit of doing it in such a heavy-handed way.
Yes.
Is such as in Kerwin White, wasn't a whole lot of tact involved with that. It was very very, very on the nose, which I think was the main problem with it.
Yeah. And obviously because of Eddie dying as well, that kind of cut the gimmick short anyway. So I think it only really lasted from I think it was June 2005 until like November when Eddie died. So it wasn't something that kind of had a lot of time to develop and maybe become its own thing. So maybe that's why it's not remembered too fondly as well.
Well, like maybe, but honestly, like had it been given more time to develop, like what else could they have done? How could they after having given us years of Chavo being Eddie's brother or Eddie's cousin, sorry, and like being part of Latino Heat, after heavily playing up the fact that he's Latino, how far could they really push the idea that Chavo Guerrero is a white guy? Like, I mean, that gimmick didn't have a whole lot of legs on it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think it was like right before the end was when they brought in Dolph Ziggler before he was Dolph Ziggler
Yeah.
as his caddy as well. Like
Mhm.
that only really lasted like a couple of weeks, so it seemed like even then at that stage they were like, well, we need to do something to kind of keep this thing going.
Yeah.
So clearly it didn't have a lot of legs to it.
Before we wrap things up, right? I want to, because we moved from one blonde guy to another.
Mm-hmm.
I want to move to another blonde guy.
Okay.
There's a lot of blonde guys in wrestling. I mean, we could probably talk about this on a whole other podcast, to be honest with you. Not just the subject, but but like gimmicks in general, because there's a lot of ground we haven't covered yet, right?
Mm.
But there's one I really want to talk about, which is one of the strangest gimmicks, because it's so hard to explain to people, right? And bearing in mind, we've talked a lot about some strange gimmicks. For example, Scott Steiner, you know, Big Papa Pump. Like, what does that even mean? It doesn't mean a whole lot. Kerwin White, that's bizarre. Like, it doesn't mean a whole lot. But to me, one of the strangest ones to try and explain to somebody is, and it's a guy that had gone through a bunch of gimmick changes, and then he found one that worked, and then after that he changed ever so slightly, and it didn't make any sense. And I'm talking about Billy Gunn,
Mm-hmm.
okay? And he was whatever he was. He was Billy Gunn in what was it? Whatever tag team he was in with Bart
The
Gunn,
smoking gun.
Smoking Guns, and then he was hanging out with who was he hanging out with?
I think, well, he was with Sonny for a little bit, and then with the Honky Tonk Man
Honky
as
Tonk Man.
Rockabilly.
Yes, that's what it was, Rockabilly, right? And then after that, he finally found his calling with the New Age Outlaws as Billy Gunn. He stuck
Mm-hmm.
with Billy Gunn, badass Billy Gunn. That's a cool nickname. No need to go any further with that, right? But no, at some point they decided, what'd be really good is if we just called Billy Gunn Mr. Ass. He was the ass man, Mr. Ass. And he had a theme song. We all remember the theme song.
Oh yeah.
Nobody can forget Billy Gunn's I'm an Ass Man theme song because they drilled that home, right? They made you really believe that this guy was an ass man. Now, can you imagine if you are a fan of wrestling and somebody's like, who's your favorite guy? And you're like, oh, I really like Billy Gunn. You're like, oh yeah, tell me more about his gimmick. And you're like, well, he used to tag team with the Road Dogg. Like, yeah, but what's he doing now? Like, well, he shows his ass to people, and he likes ass, so that's what he does now.
Do you wanna hear some of the lyrics from the song?
Yes, please. I mean, I can remember some of them.
So he likes to love them, he
Yes.
likes to kick them, he likes to shove them, and he likes to stick them. He loves to flaunt them, he loves to watch them, he loves to pick them, and he's gonna kick them.
He loves to pick them.
I well, I don't really know how he intends to pick someone's ass, but it sounds pretty gross.
I mean, fair play to the guy singing that song. He's like, shit, dude, I've run out of things after like kick. Like,
Yeah.
what else do you do to an ass?
At
Uh,
least lick wasn't in there.
yeah, but pick was, so that's not a whole lot better. But if we're talking about gimmick changes, I don't think anybody can forget that Billy Gunn was the ass man,
Mm-hmm.
which is something else. But again, fair play to him, he went for it.
Yeah. And he was like another one who did have like a few different gimmick changes as well, like when he was the one Billy Gunn,
Yes.
or Billy and Chuck as well. Yeah, I forgot about that. Like the pseudo gay gimmick where they were deliberately like pushing the boundaries, and then when it came to the point where they were supposed to get married, it was revealed that Eric Bischoff was like the kind of reverend trying to marry them, but they couldn't go through with like the gimmick or whatever. It was like bordering on, breaking kayfabe.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I mean, it was a good angle because at least it made those two guys worth watching again.
Yeah.
But isn't it isn't it funny how Billy Gunn went from the ass man to being in a gay couple? I mean, they must have known what they were doing with that one.
I don't know. I don't see the connection there. What are you talking about?
Well, he just loves picking ass, all right? All right. Do you wanna? Is the ass man a good place to end that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, should we like bring it back to Bray Wyatt and say, what do you think is gonna his like future kind of chances are of making it good with this gimmick?
Okay. In my opinion, honestly, I think that Bray Wyatt's problem isn't his delivery on anything. I think that whatever Bray Wyatt does, he does it well. The problem is the way he's been treated and the way he's been booked.
Mm.
So honestly, I think like I like the vignettes because I think he's doing a very good job at them and they're creative and they also hint at something kind of darker underneath and something interesting. But I think that the problem is just going to be that they bring him back and they just do exactly what they always do with Bray Wyatt in that they just do nothing with him. So I think Bray Wyatt has all the talent in the world and he's going to do the best he can. But ultimately, I think he's going to fall victim to the same old bad booking that he always has fallen to.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, to be honest. That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah.
I think he's been a guy who's been in desperate need for some sort of change for a long time, but I think without the booking behind him in terms of wins and losses and all that kind of jazz, I think it's not going to make much difference in the long run, which is kind of a sad thing because, like you say, he is a talented guy, obviously in the ring as well as on the mic and all that kind of stuff. But it's just, yeah, I think almost like too much damage has been done to him already that it's going to be hard to kind of get that stink off him.
Right. He's going to have to do an awful lot. And the fact that he's got the bad booking that he's going to have to fight up against is just not going to help him, I don't think. Poor Bray Wyatt.
Sucks to be him.
It does. But, at least he's not the ass man. So, all right. Maybe we'll do another podcast, I guess, in the future because this one was pretty good. It was a lot of fun. I know that there's plenty of other gimmicks that we could talk about that we haven't got around to.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll pick this one up again. But in the meantime, thank you for listening, and we will see you in the next one.